My wife Rachel and I were very fortunate to travel to Europe this summer, and we enjoyed delicious meals, hiking and cycling through picturesque landscapes, meeting locals and forging friendships with fellow sightseers. On one leg of the trip, we boarded a boat in Split, a city in Croatia, with Dubrovnik as our destination. For 3 nights and 4 days, we took to the seas with similarly aged travelers enjoying beautiful island stops, swim breaks, and local cuisine. This was not a luxury cruise, but a simple and lovely way to travel the islands. There were 26 of us on board in total, and with such a small number of people, the group dynamics were quickly noticeable. The quieter and more cerebral people gravitated to one another. Those who had an affinity for adventure found one another, and those who just wanted to test the absorbency of their livers also found one another. The first morning, Rachel and I were enjoying our coffee on the middle deck of the boat. The calm waters of the Adriatic Sea buoyed us as we passed by majestic mountains and breathtaking islands. It felt like an extraordinarily zen way to greet the day. As other travelers joined us for coffee, the conversation turned to our professions. Now, at the easiest of times, it's still a bit complicated to express what we do, as Rachel is an occupational therapist, and as you know, I'm a Cantor. So we often use our stock answers that describe Rachel's healthcare work as a therapist who helps people who have suffered brain injuries reclaim part of their lives. And for me, it's a little more complicated. I often go down the path of, do you know what a priest is? If yes. Do you know what a rabbi is? If yes, could you imagine a Jewish clergy person who is also a professional musician and singer? Often blank stares. Taking a moment to read the room, Rachel and I felt somewhat reluctant to reveal my work. You see, for the first time in our married lives, revealing our Jewish identities felt a little bit unsafe. We also felt vulnerable to share that after Croatia, we intended to travel to Israel. However, as the days passed and we got more comfortable with our new boat friends, we eventually discussed our Jewish identities, and thankfully, the conversation was safe and respectful. But measured word choice, we found, really mattered. This week, we begin a new book of the Torah, Devarim, which literally means words. Moses is preparing the Israelites for their arrival to the Promised Land, to an unknown future. As is retold in the book of Numbers, God commands that the emissaries be sent to explore the land. Panic ensues when 10 of the 12 scouts come back with rather dire reports. Only Joshua and Caleb feel optimistic about the Promised Land, their perspectives varying wildly from the other scouts. They were not intimidated by all that would be needed to achieve, to settle the land, and to ensure the survival of the Israelites. Back to Rachel and my trip. After traveling first through Italy and then Croatia, Rachel and I perpetually felt as if we were strangers in someone else's land. The languages were different, the cultures, the names, the food, the spices, everything was different and new. And when we got to Israel, it felt like coming home. In contrast to dining in restaurants in Italy or Croatia, where the language and people were foreign to us, entering a restaurant in Israel felt like entering a relative's kitchen. We belong there, and others were thrilled to have us there. Now, I've lived in Israel, and I've been to Israel dozens of times, but never have I felt this particular sense of belonging, of comfort in our peoplehood. In a world saturated with incentivized media and coercive journalism, I want to share my perspective on what it was like to visit Israel at this moment in history. These are not stories you might hear on CNN or Fox News, but nevertheless, I think they're noteworthy. Let's begin with John, an American-born Israeli who raised his family in the state of Israel. For over 40 years, he has been bountifully employed as a tourism guide and scholar, but John has only guided a handful of tours since October 7th. His entire economic future has changed because of the war. Like 60,000 other Israelis, he is a victim of a decimated tourism industry. Very rarely do we hear about the economic devastation upon the state of Israel. Now let me tell you about our friends Sharon and Shmulik. Sharon is a Pilates instructor who closed her studio shortly after October 7th. However, within a week of the start of war, her attendees began calling her, asking her to reopen because they desperately wanted some semblance of routine in their lives. And Sharon's Pilates studio was a communal gathering and wellness they craved. It became their form of group therapy. And since October 7th, Sharon has been tapped by the IDF to become a grief counselor for the families of fallen soldiers. She is trained now to guide families from the moment they hear the news of their loved ones through Shiva and Shloshim and for several months after their loss. She and a few others in this position travel the most horrific psychological journeys with families who have just lost their 18 and 19-year-old children. The grief is beyond compare. The stress of Sharon's work is unspeakable. Sharon's husband Shmulik served in the IDF and has aged out of military service. Though he was a high-level contractor, after the war began, he became a local handyman. So many of the folks in his village have left to join the fighting. So Shmulik, by necessity, travels house to house, trying to keep toilets unclogged and leaks patched and appliances working. Most often, he refuses payment for his work. Now, Rachel and I have known Shmulik and Sharon for many years, in fact, now decades. In their words, our visit was the first time they could breathe in a very long while. It's not that we offered any sort of exceptional pastoral care. They were just touched that we were willing to visit, and that we cared about their well-being, and for a few days could distract them from their post-October 7th trauma. Sharon drove us to the Nova Music Festival site. It was here that we found a picture of 22-year-old Noah Zander, who was shot dead. She grew up 1 block away from my cousin with whom we stayed. Noah's parents are seen walking the block on occasion. In their mourning, countless meals have been brought to them, and grief counselors, of course, are supporting them. The feeling in the neighborhood is that the entire neighborhood has lost a child. You see, everyone in Israel seems to be 1 degree of separation from someone who has taken hostage or murdered. Of course, there are other countless stories of people who are not directly impacted, but whose lives have been put on hold nonetheless. Couples that had to postpone weddings, students who were 1 exam away from completing their degrees when they were called up to fight. Beyond the horrific, tragic loss of innocent lives, there are ripple effects that will be processed for generations to come. Visiting Israel gave Rachel and me a great deal of perspective. There are hostage signs everywhere you look, and white pickup trucks now all have Israeli flags on them so that they won't be confused with the terrorist trucks of October 7th. The country is suffering a collective trauma while at the same time its people, they're pushing on and living their lives. Israelis are going to the beach and trying to take advantage of vacation time. They're frolicking through the streets of Tel Aviv and enjoying cafes, traveling in and out of the country, trying to create their own respite. The irony of our vacation is that while we were in a country of war, we felt safer than visiting peaceful European countries. For Rachel and me, the space between the diaspora Jew and the Israeli Jew felt closer than ever before. In Israel, we could proudly wear our Stars of David without concern of agitating tempestuous social waters. So as we turn to the book of Deuteronomy, the only book written in the first person, I invite you to all consider viewing Israel through your own eyes, creating your own conclusions about this magnificent miracle of democracy in the Middle East. I promise you that the country you visit will be markedly different from the country portrayed in the news. Naomi Shemer, Israel's most prolific songwriter, reminds us that the road to peace asks us to embrace the bee sting and the honey, the bitter and the sweet. The arrangement of this melody is intentionally cross-cultural in genre and thematically hopeful. It is a musical prayer that acknowledges the multiple layers of nuances embedded within the story of our beautiful state of Israel. Shabbat Shalom. על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על ביתנו התינוקת, שמורה לי הטוב. על האש המבוערת, על המים החזקים, על האיש השב הביתה מן המרחקים. על כל אלה, שמונה לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המה והמתוק, על נטע כל נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה, השיבנו ונשובה אל הארץ הטובה. שמונה לי על זה הבית, על הגן, על החומה, מיגון, מפח הפתע וממלחמה. שמור המעט שיש לי, על האור ועל הטף, על הפרי שלא הבשיל עוד ושנאסף. For the sake of all these these things, Lord. Let your mercy be complete. Bless the sting and bless the honey. Bless the bitter and the sweet. Don't uproot what has been planted, so our bounty can increase. Let the dearest wish be granted. Bring us peace, oh, bring us peace. Al-Nata, Konatua, Al-Tishka, et Hatikva, Hashiveni, Benashuva, El Haaretz HaTova, El Haaretz,